make me feel so young. You make me feel that spring has sprung. And every time I see you grin, I'm such a happy individual the moment that you speak. I wanna go play hide and seek. I wanna go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. You and I are just like a couple of tots running around the meadow, picking up all those forget-me-nots. You make me feel so young. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. And even when I'm old and gray, I'm gonna feel the way I do today. 'Cause you make me feel so young. You make me young. You make me feel that spring sprung. And every time I see you grin, I'm such a happy individual the moment that you speak. I wanna go play hide and seek. I wanna go and bounce the moon like a big balloon. Because you and I are just like a couple of tots running across the meadow, grabbing a ball. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, lots of bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. And even when I'm old and gray, I'm gonna feel the way I do today. 'Cause you make me feel so, man, I just feel so. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young. But let it there, so young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young. I don't know why you think that you could help me when you couldn't get by yourself. And I don't know who would ever wanna tell the seam of someone's dream. Baby, it's fine. You said that we should just be friends while I came up with that line. And I'm sure that it's for the best. If you ever change your mind, don't hold your breath. Look, you may not believe that, baby, I'm relieved when you said goodbye. My whole world shined. Hey, 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 it's a beautiful day and I can't stop myself from smiling. If I drink and then I'm buying, and I know there's no denying. It's a beautiful day, the sun is up, the music's playing, and even if it started raining, you won't hear this boy complaining. 'Cause I'm glad that you're the one who got away. It's a beautiful day. It's my turn to fly, so girls get in line, 'cause I'm easy, no playing this guy like a fool. 'Cause now I'm alright. You might have had me caged before, but not tonight. And you may not believe that, baby, I'm relieved. stay uptight. It's a supernatural delight. Everybody was dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. We get it almost every night. When the moon is a big and bright, it's a supernatural delight. Everybody was dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. They say, oh my God, I see the way you shine. Take your hand, my dear, and place them both in mine. You know you stopped me dead while I was passing by. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. Oh, I see you every time. And oh my, I like your style. You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, whoa, whoa, whoa. I never seen anybody do the things you do before. So they say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey, 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 hey. And when you're done, I'll make you do it all again. Oh my God, I see you walking by. Take my hands, my dear, and look me in my eyes. Just like a monkey, I've been dancing my whole life. But you just beg to see me dance just one more time. Ooh, I see you every time. Oh my, I like your style. You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, whoa, whoa. I've never seen anybody do the things you do before. And they say, move for me, move for me, move for me, yeah, yeah. And when you're done, I make you do it all again. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, whoa, whoa. I never seen anybody do the things you do before. And they say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey, baby. And when you're done, I make you do it all again. Move for me, your little dancing monkey. And when you're done, I make you do it. Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, whoa, whoa. Move for me, move for me, move for me. And you just begging to see me dance all again. myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. Can love me better. I can love me better, baby. Can love me better. I can love me better. Paint my nails cherry red, match the roses that you left. No remorse, no regret. I forgive every word you said. Oh, I didn't want to leave you. I didn't want to fight. Started to cry. Then remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. I can love me better, baby. I can love me better, baby. I can love me better, baby. I didn't want to leave you. I didn't want to fight. Started to cry, but then remembered I can buy myself flowers by myself, write my name in the sand all by myself, talk to myself for hours by myself, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. I can love me better than you can. I can love me better than you can. I can love me. I can love me better, baby. I can love me. I can love me better, baby. I can love me. I can love me better, baby. I can love me. I can love me better.
Tell me something, girl. Are you happy in this modern world? Or do you need more? Is there something else you're searching for? I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times I fear myself.
Tell me something, boy. Are you tired trying to feel that void? Or do you need more? Ain't it hard keeping it so hardcore? I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times I fear myself. I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground, crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now. In the shallow, in the shallow, in the shallow, we're far from the shallow.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This morning we have the keynote conference by Dr. Carlos Risco from USA. I have the honor of introducing Dr. Carlos Risco. Dr. Risco received his DVM degree in 1980 from the University of Florida and advanced clinical training had as intern in private direct practice at the China Valley Veterinary Societies, Ontario, California. He is a diplomate in the American College of Technologies. He is currently Dean of the Oklahoma State University College of Veterinary Medicine. His talk is titled Challenges and Opportunities in Veterinary Medical Education to Meet the Needs of Food Animal Producers. Dr. Carlos Risco, please.
Muy buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jaramillo, for that very nice presentation. Delighted to be here in Cancun and participate in this in the World Veterinary Buiatrics Conference. And this morning, we're going to have a shared presentation by myself and then my colleague from Oklahoma State University, Dr. Rosalind Biggs, Assistant Clinical Professor in our college and beef cattle extension veterinarians. And we want to talk to you this morning about the challenges and opportunities in veterinary medicine, medical education to meet the needs of food animal producers. So when I sit back and I listen to all the wonderful presentations that we've had this past week, the new technology, the new advances, in animal production, both dairy and beef cattle, it just kind of reminds me is, are we training, are we preparing our veterinary students for the next generation of food animal veterinarians to apply those new technologies and at the same time meet the needs of the producers? So we're going to talk a little bit about challenges and opportunities, instructional strategies beyond the traditional curriculum, and the traditional curriculum is perhaps to think differently and training our veterinary students beyond diagnosis and treatment and start incorporating production medicine concepts. And then Dr. Biggs is going to talk about some innovative continuing education approaches. So we know, and speaking to the choir, as they say in the United States, that bovine veterinarians have a long and laudable history of meeting evolving societal needs worldwide through protection of human, animal health, and the food supply. This we know. And we know the roles that our colleagues in food animal medicine have. Food and fiber animal health, companion animal health, and by this, I'm talking about those veterinarians that are in rural practices or so-called mixed animal practice in the United States where they do small animal and large animal, zoonotic and emergent diseases, animal welfare, food safety and security, and they're the economic drivers of rural communities. This we know. So this data here, or this slide, is from AVMA, American Veterinary Medical Association 2024 Economic State of the Veterinary Profession. So this is a snapshot of how many veterinarians in the United States. And you notice that we have a little bit over 124,000 veterinarians, but only 1.3% are food animal, and about 4.4% are mixed animals that they do all species. This number, actually both, are dwindling. I don't know what your experiences are, but certainly in the United States, we're having a bit of a challenge to bring students in after graduation to go into food animal practice. And certainly, this was evident 2 years ago in Madrid where we had the Buiatrics conference, and there were different, we had a panel of discussion. It was led by Dr. Savio and myself, and there were representatives from Germany, different parts of Europe, Australia, and it was the same concern, the shortage of food animal veterinarians. So what are the challenges? And you know this, at least in the United States, this one. The educational debt to income ratio. As you know, in the United States, our students, when they graduate, they have a pretty high debt load for their education. We're talking about $130,000 to $150,000 debt. So this is the main issue, because then when they go into rural practice, can they make less? Student experience and interest, social isolation, spousal employment, lack of childcare, access to other services, work-life balance, emergency duty, leave availability, mental health, as quoted or reported by Villarroel, 2020. Other challenges, long working days, call duties, etc. And we're pretty familiar with these challenges. So we're working on it. Dr. Biggs, my colleague, and others in the United States are working. How can we ameliorate this issue? How can we enhance, foster an interest in our students to enter food animal practice or mixed rural practices by addressing these issues? But there's another challenge. Evolving producer expectations, production medicine. Are we training veterinary students to meet the needs, whether they're dairy producers, whether they're beef, cattle producers, wellness programs, financial decision making, performance data analysis, facility evaluation, employee training, milk quality, udder health, biosecurity, public health, and nutrition. And one more is artificial intelligence. Where is veterinary medicine? Where are we as veterinarians? Where are we as educators going to play a role? What is going to be our role in this artificial intelligence in the future? So I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Biggs, and she's going to talk a little bit, finish the presentation on how do we educate, train the next generation of food animal veterinarians.
Thank you, Dean Risco, and I appreciate the opportunity to be included this morning, particularly to a group that this is an interest to me. I'm a second-generation veterinarian, second-generation large animal veterinarian, and I am passionate about agriculture and where veterinary medicine sits in agriculture, and in particular, how we prepare for the future and meet those producer expectations. So as we ask ourselves, how do we educate these students to be practice ready? And I think we'll hear from some of our colleagues later this morning about the elements that can perhaps make that and what is needed there. So I won't go into the details in too much. However, how do we train them? How do we address production medicine to ultimately address the shortage that we are seeing really internationally? So as we look at the research, and frankly, perhaps a bit of a challenge to those in the room, because I would like to see a greater depth of research, more research in this area. I'm, as I mentioned, very passionate about it and look forward to it. This is some information out of Sweden and focused on what they call veterinary herd health management. For us and the purposes of today, production medicine. And this particular study really aimed to explore what the veterinarians' interpretation of production medicine was and really understand the factors affecting implementation as well as performance as it related to the challenges you can see in the bullets here. So challenges as far as veterinarians recognizing that we need to be proactive in health consultation. It's been a slow process, they noted, in Sweden. Certainly, I think we've seen that in the United States, challenges we have specifically in Oklahoma. And it's really overall a small proportion of work that is done, but I would beg you to ask the question, should that be the case moving forward? So this particular study had some conclusions that focused on the need for support and mentorship for those that are less experienced. And we'll talk a little bit about that as it relates to our program at Oklahoma State. Additionally, capacity development as it relates to communication and training. I personally feel that we need greater emphasis on leadership, communication, those kind of training skills in order to have a better veterinary workforce across the board, not just in large animal medicine. And then also they concluded there is a need for training of the entire veterinary team in order to support production medicine. Additionally, we took a look in this study at why do veterinarians truly enter rural veterinary practice, at least in the United States. And farm backgrounds played a role, early life exposure played a role, rural practice mentor comes up yet again here. And then the emphasis that I'm hoping those in the room today have on how do we expose them in veterinary school to rural practice? So for those of you in the academic realm, we certainly have our specific challenges there as well. Delivering population approaches to animal systems, as the dean mentioned, not just a diagnosis and treatment of an individual animal, but really a proactive approach and an understanding of the systems we have to produce at a large scale and address those producer expectations. And then the challenges we have really of providing any veterinary education, whether that be challenges in efficiencies or challenges, certainly we have shortages in the United States of academic veterinarians at the current time. And so those challenges play into this overall approach. So when it comes to the approaches that we feel are really additive, complementary, supportive of traditional veterinary curriculum, clerkship and externships really rise to the top there. It is not just a shadow of a veterinarian in production medicine. It is a dedicated clerkship, spending time typically in private practices, seeing it firsthand and understanding what it takes with a set of objectives. Additionally, we have focused on elective courses, and our program that we'll discuss in a bit has been recently approved by the university as an elective course, which has been really beneficial. And I think as we look at elective courses too, particularly with delivering this content, I think there needs to be a collaborative approach across colleges of veterinary medicine, that if I have a student that is interested in swine medicine, perhaps I want to send them to the Midwest part of the United States where a clerkship is offered. If they have a student that's interested in particular in feedlot medicine, Oklahoma or Texas does that very well and can have that experienced. Additionally, focused clinical rotations where we have faculty members that are dedicated to these areas and have built relationships with producers to not only serve those producers, bring the research from the university level to them, but allow our students to see it firsthand, and then advanced training programs as well. So as educators, I think we always have to take a moment and say, well, what's going to be the best method of delivering this content? And I think particularly coming out of the pandemic, we are maybe better at delivery in a variety of different ways. We had to be very flexible and innovative in delivering that content. And so I'm hopeful that we will be able to capitalize on that moving forward. And so as we deliver this content, certainly the traditional curriculum, this traditional classroom setting has to play a role. However, as we look to additive or supplementary focus, online content, whether it be asynchronously, and when I say asynchronously, I really mean on-demand content. When that student or that veterinary graduate has an opportunity to take the content at their convenience, there is value there, and I think we have a group of more recent graduates in particular that are very comfortable with that approach. We also have online synchronously, where you and I are not in the same meeting space, but we're able to interact across the internet and deliver content in that mechanism. So there is a direct interaction. And then what we have seen, certainly in continuing education at Oklahoma State, has been a continued interest in a hybrid delivery, meaning our major fall meeting, for instance, has really maintained in excess of 30% of our attendance has been online. So we have people that are coming in person as well as those that are joining us virtually, and they may join us virtually from any point around the world. And so that hybrid delivery, it's not, we're trying to offer as much education to meet the needs of the individual veterinarian at their convenience and bringing the information to them. Additionally, I don't know a veterinarian, certainly don't know a veterinary student that ever turns down a wet lab. That's constantly a request for our veterinary continuing education team. And so getting your hands dirty, getting to do it right there in front of you with the instructor over your shoulder, we never get turned down for those wet labs. And then also focusing on workshops that are dedicated to certain topics too. So it's really my pleasure, and I'm excited to tell you more about our integrated beef cattle program for veterinarians. So the integrated beef cattle program started as an idea of Dean Risco, and he put together a cross-disciplinary collaborative team across the university with additional representation from private practice. At that time in early 2019, that we were hopeful we were going to get to do that. The pandemic played a little bit different in our schedule, but we've been able to carry through. We put together a grant, and we're very fortunate to receive a grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, through their Veterinary Services Grants Program, with the education, extension, and training pillar of that program. And so that allowed us to really kind of take a look. And so I'm going to explain what our overall objectives were. Ultimately, and still today, our objective of this program is to increase rural practice sustainability, not only from a dollar perspective, not only from a financial perspective, but also keeping services available to producers, expanding that service, putting more tools in the toolbox, so to speak, of our participants, and then also recruiting and retaining graduates, because certainly in the United States, and what we see at Oklahoma State specifically, is we turn out at Oklahoma State typically 20 to 25% of our class is intended to go large or mixed animal. However, when we survey them again at around year 5, there's a significant number that are no longer in that style of practice. And so how do we bridge that gap to keep those students that came to veterinary school to do this kind of work? How do we keep them in those practices and make them thrive? So our plan initially started with data collection. We did a survey of beef cattle veterinarians in the state of Oklahoma. We also surveyed our veterinary students and had good responses across our veterinary classes from first, second, third, and fourth year. And we also surveyed beef cattle producers for their input. And we were looking for, frankly, we knew we had a situation in Oklahoma with rural veterinary shortage, rural veterinary underservice, but we didn't have data necessarily to support that. And that has helped us in a number of different ways as we have been able to use the information gathered from this program to support additional initiatives, particularly with policymakers and those that have the ability to influence funding. So from that data, we went and put together a curriculum. The curriculum development is very broad, and we'll go over some instances of what that curriculum looks like, and then we implemented it. As I mentioned, the pandemic changed things for us. We really felt like this was content that did not need to be delivered in a virtually exclusive manner. We were wanting to have these individuals, these class members side by side, and so that was delayed a little bit, but we're very fortunate this year we're finishing up our 3rd class of this program. And ultimately, one of the reasons why we wanted them to be side by side is the networking, the relationship building, and the conversations that I'm going to assure you many of you are making. You may be learning more in the hallways here and the exhibit hall and the people you're meeting from around the world rather than just in the classroom sessions. So we knew we needed time for that. So to share a little bit of information about our veterinary survey, we had 162 DVM responses. That represented 34% response rate, and if you're not familiar with human surveying, anything over 20%, I was like, what do you mean it's 34%? I thought I needed it to be 90. It needs to be better than that. But 34% was representative. Of the veterinarians, 60% were owners, just under 40% were mixed animal, just under 40% had been in practice greater than 30 years, and then when you combine that particular data point with the fact that just over 50% were single doctor practices, it gives us information that we have an aging, closer to retirement group of veterinarians in Oklahoma that particularly if they are a single doctor practice and not capable or don't have the resources to bring in an associate and keep them there, the concern we have from a producer perspective is that those practices will close their doors. And ultimately, at least in Oklahoma, rural veterinary practices can be incredible drivers of local economies. And so we feel like this is something we're going to continue to focus upon. So as we ask those veterinarians, what's your biggest challenge in practice sustainability? These were really no surprises to us. You know, the largest portion being poor work-life balance. Again, those challenges we mentioned, on-call, not having access to services, that kind of thing in rural spaces. Certainly hiring an associate came up high as well. We have 77 counties in Oklahoma. We asked, are you hiring now, or are you going to plan to hire in the next year? Over 40 of our 77 counties were represented saying yes. And so we knew, even though we just have a 34% response rate, that solidified that we have the need to put more rural practitioners, more recent graduates in those counties. And then as you looked at the other challenges to that practice sustainability, certainly finances comes to the top, personal health comes to the top, and lack of clients was a concern as well. So I've previously mentioned mentorship. Mentorship is huge in my book and a big focus of our program. We asked our students, and I think this is a big one, and so if you have a moment to think about this, we asked our students, are you interested in beef cattle medicine? And if the answer is yes, do you currently have a mentor that is in beef cattle veterinary practice? And just over 52% said, no, I don't have that person in my life. And me being very fortunate to have great mentors in this area, it is critical. And I have students that come into my office on a regular basis, and I ask them, what are they looking for? What are they wanting in practice? And they say mentorship, but they don't necessarily know how to define it. So we felt like this program gives us the opportunity to put veterinarians and veterinary students side by side. And that's what our students said too. We asked our students, well, if you were given the chance to learn in a curriculum side by side with beef cattle veterinarians, my personal hope is that's their future mentor too, perhaps in that room. Are you interested? Nearly 85% said, yeah, I'm game. And that's what we have seen as far as interest in our students. We have students that are really raring to go when we open up these open up these opportunities. So as I mentioned, I won't go through the individual names, but you can read them here. This was a cross-disciplinary collaborative approach. So from Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service, we have a presence from animal science. We have a presence from agricultural leadership. We have a presence from agricultural economics, as well as veterinary extension. From the veterinary medicine side, certainly we have faculty members. We have private practice. Dr. Richard Prather has been at this meeting. He's really been on the cutting edge as far as practitioners and their approach, and so we're very fortunate to have him on our team, as well as faculty members and leadership from veterinary medicine. And I think that's key when we look at these type of programs is this collaborative approach. We certainly see that in research, reaching across expertise to try to provide the best outcome. So the curriculum itself, this program puts together approximately 20 practicing beef cattle veterinarians and 20 veterinary students. We started initially with it being only Oklahoma veterinarians. I can tell you in our third year, we have expanded our geographic distribution quite a bit. Although the bulk of them are Oklahoma veterinarians, we have veterinarians joining us. They're coming all the way to Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is a delightful place. In case you don't know, you should come visit. I invite you all. We'd be happy to see you. But we have veterinarians coming from Canada. We have veterinarians coming from Florida. We have veterinarians coming from Idaho. And if you're not familiar with U.S. geography, those are not places you can get in a couple of hours. It is a really dedicated approach that you need to, they're wanting to come. We also have presence from Arizona and Texas and Iowa, for instance. As far as our veterinary students, the vast majority of them are Oklahoma State students. We do hold these in-person sessions outside the traditional semester so that we can support them in that way. But we're very fortunate this year to have, in addition to our Oklahoma State students, Iowa State students, as well as Mississippi State students as well. So we have varied experience levels, which is beautiful. We have veterinarians that have been out less than a year, and we have veterinarians that have been out 40 years. And what we see in that relationship, especially as we mix our students with them, is the sharing of expertise. That veterinarian that has been out 40 years has the institutional knowledge. They've done it all the wrong ways and all the right ways, and they're very open to sharing that experience. And we have more recent graduates and our students coming alongside those more experienced veterinarians and say, well, have you thought about this technology, for instance? Are you incorporating this? And we're seeing those small changes as a result. As I mentioned, they're geographically dispersed. We also focus on experiential learning, so that is really focused on the experience. We encourage discussion. It is not just someone lecturing to the class all day. We try to get them out in the field. You'll see in this image here, Dr. Dave Lallman, who is one of our exceptional Oklahoma State extension specialists, and in his area is cow efficiency, does a lot of work in nutrition. He teaches our nutrition component. We also have used a learning management system. We use Canvas Catalog to house all of this content. We're covering a wide number of areas, and we're not going to get the depth necessarily for everyone in the classroom. So we try to use our learning management system to keep people in contact with each other. We try to use that to provide resources. So if you have a particular interest in a certain area, you're able to dig deeper there. And then we have allowed, as I mentioned, significant networking time to get these individuals. They need to know each other. They need to build those relationships and able to succeed. So the curriculum itself, we have a big focus on adaptive leadership, communication. We spend a whole in-person module focusing, it's about a day and a half, focusing on really those two elements. We discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also discuss mentorship. And although I've mentioned predominantly our in-person modules, I would be remiss to explain how we've delivered all of this content in a very few days. So as I mentioned, we have a learning management system. We have 3 in-person modules in January, May, and July, again, outside our students' traditional semester. And then for each month that we don't meet in person, we have a 2-hour either asynchronous content that they take or synchronous content they take that we deliver via Zoom. And so we supplement all of these things in between. That allows us to be very cognizant of the economic implications, particularly for our practitioners and the travel costs associated coming to see us. So we're trying to balance that, and it's worked very, very well the last 2 years in doing that. We also, as I mentioned, have agricultural economics on our team. They focus on consumer preferences, consumer demands. We also discuss practice modeling. Not only do we bring in faculty members from across the university, but we bring in private practitioners that are really cutting edge, leading the charge of trying things in a different way. And so we want to bring them in and let students and veterinarians learn best practices from them as well. And so we also discuss, as you might guess, associate recruitment and practice buying and selling, nutrition and welfare, facility design, pain management and herd health protocols from that perspective. We do a lot on herd data analysis and the capacity for more practices, as we have mentioned time and time again this morning, on production medicine, using data to make informed decisions and how we're able to do that. One thing we just had our our second module, in-person module 2 weeks ago. Dr. Prather that I mentioned is a private practitioner that joins us. One of the things that I drilled into the class was, did you hear what Dr. Prather said? I am using data, and he has informed his producers, and they have picked that information up and taken it. He's not done a C-section which inevitably, right, happens at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's never on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. It's always at inconvenience times. For the practices that have used his approach, the number of C-sections, the number of emergencies that he has is virtually nil. So that herd data analysis and making educated decisions and not just being a practice style that's fire engine medicine is very, very important. We also discuss reproductive management, and we must discuss veterinary mental health as well as physical health when it comes to practice too. So in addition to delivering this content, again, veterinarians and veterinary students side by side, in-person modules and virtual content delivery. We've also added these other elements to supplement the experience. We've developed text messaging groups where if you're a solo doctor practitioner, you can say, hey, I got this really weird thing. Can you take a look at it? So you get coaching and mentorship and feedback from a multi-doctor style approach, but it's virtual. And so we've set those things up in order to allow them to do that. We've also increased social media content and to allow our practitioners and our students to get the word out. The beauty for us, especially in this third class, is of having people from across the United States and even Canada join us is we have no marketing budget for this program, right? I'll pick on the dean. We didn't get a marketing budget for it. So this has really been a word of mouth kind of approach, and social media has been key there, but also really elevating the discussion when it comes to the need of food supply veterinarians, particularly those that operate in rural spaces. We also get a bit of concierge type service when it comes to scholarship announcements, to practice opportunities for funding, loan programs as well. I can send those things out to every licensed veterinarian in the state of Oklahoma, but this group will pay more attention if it comes from me directly and it is not a mass email. I also include those in ways in text messaging. Frankly, text messaging you're more likely to see and respond to, at least in my experience, versus one more email in the hundreds you may get a day. Additionally, we have offered application advisement for a variety of programs offered in the United States. And then also, this is key, direct access to expertise. So I've talked a lot about the program, and I'm hoping these videos will play. I could use some help at the back. I want you to hear from our participants.
Programs like the Integrated Beef Cattle Program are something that I really look forward to, not only to hone skills and gain more knowledge, but especially the Integrated Beef Cattle Program really taught me how to be value added, not only to our practice, but more importantly, to our clients and their bottom line.
I think that this program is great for our state in the fact that we're getting connections. That's my favorite part of this program, and that's one of the main reasons why I applied for it, is to get these connections. I don't know of any other program that I could be a part of where I would get to meet so many different people in the beef industry, and now I know them on a first name basis. I can call them with questions if I need it. I know I don't have to be an expert in everything because I know experts in those fields that I can contact for that information. And I think that as a new graduate, that helps me better serve my producers, and that's important to me because as a new graduate, I don't know everything that I need to know. So if I have resources or people that I can reach out to get that information, that's going to definitely help my producers.
So along with leadership and networking that comes with programs like the Integrated Beef Cattle Program, I really look forward to presenters that come in and talk about veterinary medicine as a business. As an industry and a profession, we talk about it all the time at home and in our practice. Our job as veterinarians is to take care of people through the treatment of their animals.
So those are some of our veterinarians. We'll move to some comments from some of our students.
This program has been so much more than just beef cattle medicine. We've gotten to really learn about managing a practice, getting to interact with colleagues and people that are older and have such experience, and getting to learn that things that have worked for them, things that haven't worked out for them, and you've really gotten to experience those people, build relationships and network, but also learn from them and learn so much in terms of things you can take back and hopefully things that I can one day take back and put into use in my practice.
I think that this program has been really foundational in bringing real-world production medicine back to the classroom, and it's going to be extremely beneficial over the next 3 years as I'm completing my DVM, to have resources to go back to and people to talk to about questions that we may not directly address in the classroom building, but knowing that that's going to be important in the real world is going to be really, really beneficial.
Some of the benefits I've seen from the Integrated Beef Cattle Program are the networking with older practitioners and established veterinarians who are doing the same type of medicine that I want to practice. And so it's been really good to make those connections, as well as the resources we've been provided. We've had some incredible speakers and some incredible resources brought forward in some of the different meetings we've had. So it's overall just been a really great opportunity to network and get some new connections, new tools to add to our toolbox.
It's been a program that's been so much more than just learning, like I said, about beef cattle. It's been an experience that truly is integrated in terms of supplying so many different outlooks on different topics that we face as rural veterinarians.
So I should mention one of the responses, more than once, that we've received from our participants is they want more. We cover a lot of different areas and we offer a lot of different resources, but in particular our recent graduates have come back to us and requested they're looking for more, and so we're continuing to evolve this program moving forward and considering developing a bit of a 2.0 version where we would get into a smaller cohort of participants and look at, in particular, things like communication and leadership and practice management at a really detailed level for those participants. So I've included this QR code. It will take you, if you have the capability, it will take you directly to our website, and you can take a look at more information and have that available to you. We would be really excited if you would be interested in participating in the future. We're going to take a little bit of a break for 2025 and recoup and reorganize, and we unfortunately will run out of veterinarians if we look at it every year. And so this is a program that moving forward will likely be every other year that we offer that, and then hopefully be able to look at that 2.0 version so that we can complement that as well. So in conclusion, when it comes to food animal medicine teaching and continuing education, really where do we go from here? It becomes critical for us to address the shortage of food supply veterinarians, whether they be in private practice, whether they be in academia, whether they be in public service. Those are areas that are going to continue to become more challenging, and as the Dean mentioned, our numbers in the United States continue to creep downward. Additionally, to try to supplement that, we've got to complement our traditional curriculum. I think our students and our veterinarians are looking for more. They're looking for things to, again, add more tools to their toolbox and be able to provide, ultimately, better service to their producers and be flexible in that. And so with that, we are dedicated at Oklahoma State to continuing to develop production medicine, continuing education. These are resources, if you're interested in those, that we have both our continuing education side as well as the specific integrated beef cattle site. It will pull up if you find your preferred search engine. And then we also wanted to recognize the startup grant funding for this program from USDA NIFA as well. And I think we have a bit of time for questions, if there are questions. And Dean, perhaps I would let you do those if.
Okay, beautiful program now. We thank Dr. Risco and Dr. Rosalind, her conference. I invite you to present his questions for Dr. Rosalind, please. Can you use the microphone? Please.
Is it on? Yeah. Nynne Kim Young, University of Copenhagen. I teach bovine medicine vet students. And I was wondering, at what point in their program, study program, do you actually point out who wants to do beef cattle?
Well, certainly for the integrated beef cattle program, we have participants because it's relatively new from our first year, second year, third year, fourth year. But what we've seen since the initial class is the bulk of them are interested in the first and second year. And I will give you a little bit of a experience from 2 weeks ago. We have a first year student, and we had a private practitioner in a colleague and friend of mine that owns multiple practices in Texas. And she comes and speaks and gives real world speak to our students. And the student at the break, I could tell, was a bit overwhelmed. And so I pulled her aside and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "It's just a lot of information, and I didn't know." She said, in that turn, then says, "But I'm glad I found out now. I'm glad I find out now so that she can move forward with it," because she's interested in the practice. So I think overall, if I were to speak for recruitment of food animal practitioners, I don't think you can do it too early. Like, I'm talking like elementary childhood skills all the way through. We actually, while we've been here this week, we have 4-H in the States, and we had a 4-H program for junior and seniors in high school. So we're trying to do it all the way through. But as far as the veterinary students, we're trying to capture everyone we could before they graduated. But ideally, I think in that first and second year is the best approach.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? But thank you, Dr. Rosalind. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Very great. Okay, we have continued. There is a change in the speaker below. The Professor Victoria Castrellón could not be here, so the Professor Maria Ángela Ramo from Spain will give the conference, Transhumans, Bringing the Student Closer to the Rural Work. Please, Professor María Ángeles.
So, good morning. I'm sorry, but my English is so bad. I am very nervous, and I try to do a mix between English and Spanish. I'm trying to Spanglish. My name is María Ángeles Ramos. I am from University of Zaragoza on Spain. I'm going to try to explain our activity, Transhumans, bringing the student closer to the rural world. Well, our adventure begins in the Sierra of Albarracín. The Sierra de Albarracín is located in the southwest of the community of Aragon in the province of Teruel in the central edge of Spain. Sierra de Albarracín. It's a big high mountain region whose economy is based on forest records, livestock farming, mainly sheep for meat and tourism. The latter are only complementary to the previous areas. The Sierra de Albarracín has area of 1,000 for population, alternation of mountain range with altitude close to 2,000 meters, valleys and canyons, abundant rainfall, winters with average of less 12 centigrades, day-night interval up to 20 grades. Harsh winters and for shortage, solution transhumans. These orographic and climatic circumstances, together with the peculiarity of the form of crisis that is based on the use communal pastures, why the municipality and not for use private farms, mean that in the winter times the sheep have to go in search of better pastures. But the transhumans is not today this more antiquate. Faith shapes remains Pyrenean sound, Celtic peoples, very breathes, transhumans in the Maestrazgo, Romans, barbarians, and Visigoths livestock wealth, Arabs Berber peoples transhumans throughout North Africa. 3rd century was created Honorable Council of La Mesta, 5th century Mesta de Albarracín, century 7th, there are 68,000 sheep transhumans. This is a prehistoric sheep. Ninth century, dissolution of the Mesta and creation of the National Livestock Association, livestock decline, expansion of European merino sheep, 20th century, slow pastoral recovery, industrial crossings, and 21st century remains violent. Now, not all the movements livestock are the same. We must differentiate between nomadism, which is the movement of livestock without a fixed route moving in search of better pasture, transtermitancy, which will be short tribes or between neighbor farms, and transhumancia, which is characterized by going on foot and they work along the livestock trails for the winter area or place where they sheep graze in winter to the regular area when the graze during the summer month, spending 6 months in each place. There are 2 transhumance routes. 2 fundamentally transhumance routes depart from the Sierra del Barracín, the one that runs towards to east, which will be what we call the short transhumance toward the old kingdom of Valencia, and the long transhumance that depart towards to south of Spain. Now, in Spain, there are 125,000, ¿está bien? kilometers of livestock trails that are classified according to their worth. Ravine with Cañada with 75 meters, Cordel with 35 medium meters, and Vereda 25 meters. We are going to travel through the Cañada Real for Cuenca o Cañada de los Chorros, that is the number 5, from Teruel to Jaén. But there are 2 areas from Transhumancia. Agostaderos, where the sheep was in summer, and winters, where they are in invierno. The sheep of Albarracín, they are agostaderos, and the invernaderos Sierra Morena. Transhumance serfs of the 50s. But we have already presented the livestock situation, but how do we get it accepted as a training proposal for the student? To do this, we rely on the Bologna Plan, which was a document signed the Minister of Education of then 29 European countries, and it is based on the process of convergencia to the European higher education area, focused of learning that promotes the ability of self-learning of the part of the student, oriented towards the development of skills with reference to academic and professional profiles with concern for the result. Its fundamental task must be aimed at teach to the student to learn, develop your personal autonomy, encourage critical thinking and reflection on your learning process. Practice with animals in a context where they can perceive the real situation or closer to the future practice of the veterinary profession, the possibility of accompanying a flock of 3,000 transhumants for 24 days on their journey through the Royal Canyon of Cuenca, Cañada Real Conquense, from the town of Guadalaviar in la province of Teruel to the town of Vilches in Jaén in Andalusia. Adaptation of theoretical practical knowledge in direct contact with the sector, better knowledge of file diagnostic, and the application of therapeutic and prophylactic measures. A total of 32 students were distributed, accompanied by 2 teachers in 4 weekly periods throughout the entire route in the month of November. The distance traveled is 500 kilometers in daily days of 18 or 20 kilometers. Multidisciplinary activity in which teachers from different areas and departments have participated. The use of a small file laboratory was launched to respond to the problems that arose during the activity period. Throughout the tour, conferences are given and numerous debates of clinical cases are generated with the participation of professors, ranchers, and students. The tasks were distributed in rotation so that all students had go through them. 1. Prepare camp and assemble the electric shepherd. Help along the way, shepherds. Prepare meals, collaborate in the taming of problems. Prepare camp and set up the electric shepherds. Help along the way, shepherds. Because across roads, principal roads. Prepare meals and collaborate in the training of problems. Well, you all know the problems. It's the livestock donkey, and its function is to carry water. That is to transport drinking water and part of the provisions so that the shepherds can eat and drink. That the results that we have obtained from carrying out this activity of these years and more than 325,000 have been development and launch of a blog to provide greater knowledge and dissemination of the exploitation system tool from their perspective. Can you see? Final degree of projects, extensive publication and dissemination in the medios, traveling photographic exhibitions throughout various parts of Spain, book, Chronics of the Parts, Peripatetics and Transhumance, and presentation our activity at the World Congress on Buiatrics in Mexico 25. Some reflection from the students. And what is that we wrote? A lot less prejudice, a good collection of memories. We brought with us all the world of people who thought us to look with optimism and love everything you do. They show us the value of effort. The effort is being a shepherd, and the shepherd among shepherds. My most sincere gratitude. It's funny how returning to everyday life, going to school again, the classes, the unbearable practical schedules, the rush, the stress with biographical work makes you value what you have experienced this week. This experience serves as will belong academic veterinary training and lets up make it in a personal way that we are sure will help us grow as people. Thank you so much.
I like the holistic vision. Interesting to place the transhumances in the panorama of the veterinary science. Thank you, Dr. Maria Ángeles Ramos. Any questions, please? Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the next conference. The following scientific conference is the Who Feeds in Farm Animal Practice and Mixed Methods, a study of veterinary student perceptions. John Remnan from Canada.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming on the last day of the conference to the education stream. It's great to see so many people interested. Before I start, I should also be very clear, I'm not presenting my own work. This work was all led by Emily Payne. She's a faculty member at the University of Nottingham, where I was working just over 12 months ago. And Emily and Chris in the middle were two of our undergraduate DVM students who led different parts of the analysis. So I want to talk you through the background to this study. I'll explain how we investigated it, but I want to focus most on the results, then I'm hoping you'll all join in with the discussion at the end. To start with the background, I think the earlier talks from Dr. Risco and Biggs have set us up for this well. But the UK context this work was conducted in was that back in 2018, the British Cattle Veterinary Association ran a survey. And these two questions were the ones I've pulled out. Do you consider there to be an issue with recruitment of farm animal vets to your practice? And 80% of respondents said yes. And then do you consider there to be an issue with retention of farm animal vets in your practice? And 49% said yes. So the country was worried we weren't able to recruit and retain vets in farm or rural practice. And whenever I talk about this topic, I feel like I should ask for a show of hands of anyone that has similar issues. And I have given up asking now because I think this is a global problem, and that context was made very clear this morning. This is a problem all over the world. I've recently moved to Canada, and certainly it's something we discuss almost daily at the University of Calgary in Alberta. So the study, we wanted to try and shed a bit of light on what vet schools can do. It's a complex and multifaceted problem, but as an educator, what can I do? What can we understand from our students to make progress in this area? So we launched, Emily launched an electronic survey that was circulated to every veterinary student at every school in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. We had just over 1,100 responses from across all the UK and Irish vet schools, and this was back in October 2018. We did a descriptive analysis of the responses to questions around what they wanted from their career, what they thought it would be like, what things inspired them or put them off. And then we did some thematic analysis of all the free text responses. And just as a side note, people in qualitative research often say you don't get enough rich data from surveys to conduct thematic analysis properly. But with an emotive subject like this, one of the things that caught us out slightly, or more specifically caught Emily out slightly, was almost all of the 1,100 respondents had written very lengthy free text comments because there was so much emotion and passion about this topic. And then we went through and identified themes that related to student attitudes to careers in bovine practice. And then I thought I should be transparent. We did present this part of the research back in Madrid 2 years ago. And the first part of the research was published in the Vet Record. Just in case you weren't all lucky enough to attend the conference in Madrid, a very brief summary of where we got to at that stage. So this was looking at the whole survey with lots of questions around what was good or bad about going into production animal practice, why might a student consider it a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. And Emily identified these themes in the data, things around lifestyle that maybe put students off or made it more appealing, particularly things like being outside was considered a real positive. Communication, things they'd heard or seen on farms or from other vets, often small animal vets. I think it's something we overlook, that a lot of our students' opinions on production animal practice aren't necessarily informed by production animal vets. Some comments around their ethics and values, that maybe production work didn't align with their views on what was wrong and right. Some individual things around safety or confidence in that sector. Lots about direct experience and the value of experience on farms and in veterinary practice. And then something we called perception of fit, and then individual preferences and interests. And this came across very strongly. It's very hard to argue with. If you just really like small animal orthopedics and you really don't like production medicine, that's fine. That's something we should encourage and support. But what I want to talk to you about today is our more detailed analysis on this concept we picked up in the data on perception of fit. We've never quite been sure what to call it, but when we say fit in this context, we mean the idea that you fit in, that you belong, that you're welcome in a sector. So we wanted to analyse this in a bit more detail to try and understand what did this mean, what does it mean to fit in farm animal practice. So the results from this part of the study are what I'd like to share with you today. One of the questions we asked in this survey was the level of agreement students had with the statement, someone like me can work in farm animal practice. And this question, to be clear, this question followed a series of demographic questions asking about their background, their ethnicity, their religion, their nationality. And we just followed it with, given the answers you've given already, can someone like you work in farm animal practice? So this isn't about whether you want to or whether you plan to. This is about whether you could, whether you felt able to. And we used a Likert style item for the responses. So a score of 5 was for strong agreement, and a score of 1 was strong disagreement, and it was a 5-point scale. I'm very passionate about teaching students, but I do also really like numbers. So for other people like me that like the methods and numbers, these data wouldn't normally be considered continuous. So we did test a series of different multiple regressions using linear models, logistic models, and multinomial models. The significant associations were the same with all 3 models. So I'll present the linear results here because they're slightly easier to interpret. So this is quite a messy slide, but for people that aren't as interested as I am in regression modeling, this is a way of capturing lots of different factors at once and looking at the effect of or association of each of these demographic types with the overall outcome, but accounting for the others at the same time. So the N number is just the number of respondents in that category, and the coefficient is when we compare that category to the reference category, which is just a dash. And here, a negative number means someone was, on average, people with that attribute scored lower down the scale, so they felt less able to go into production animal practice. And just to apologise in case I unintentionally caused any offence, the language I've used here and for the survey is the commonly accepted terminology in Britain for some of these characteristics, and I'm aware that in different countries there's preferred terminology for some of these groups. So the key take-home messages here are across these characteristics, gender and ethnicity. The key things to point out here are that the significant differences were that female respondents felt less able on average than male respondents to go into production animal practice. And then in ethnicity, I guess what in North America would be referred to as racialized groups were strongly less likely to feel that they could progress into farm practice. So compared to the white population, on average, the Asian British group were about half a point lower down on the scale, and the Black African Caribbean and Black British respondents were on average a whole step lower down on that scale. And then more data, this was all part of one model, so these all cross-account for each other. The background people were from, we asked about, and the nationality grouped into sort of parts of the world. And the same thing here, the key points here are that if you're from a farming community, then we used you as the reference, and then people from a rural area but not a farming community, and people from an urban or suburban area were less likely to feel able to go and work in farm animal practice. And then nationality, it almost looked, with the exception of North America, and some of the vet schools in the UK have a lot of US students in them, with the exception of North America, the further away you were from the UK originally, the less able you felt to go into farm animal practice. I think one slight aside, very occasionally I've heard people say things like, oh, but the nationality effects, or the fact that we don't attract a more racially diverse group of people into production practice might be related to religion. We did ask people's religion, and we did include that in the model, but there was no significant effect of religion here. So the race or ethnicity and nationality effects are independent of religion and independent of each other. But I guess where this gets really interesting and perhaps easier to understand what people are talking about is we followed this question with, where we asked agreement with someone like me can work in farm animal practice, by saying, can you explain why? Why have you given this answer? And we used thematic analysis, again, a way of looking at lots of qualitative data, trying to look for themes that arise in it that we can group together to try and give some meaning to the individual responses. The two Emilys involved in this work worked on this together and came up with these broad themes, things around career opportunities, nature of the career, experiences, perceptions that the respondents had, and relationships they had. So career opportunities, a lot of this was around where people wanted to live or where they did live. I live in a city, my partner lives in a city, I'm going to have to live in a city, I can't work in rural practice and live in a city at the same time. Things around available opportunities, I'm not sure there's jobs for me, I'm not sure there's jobs where I want to live, and awareness came through quite strongly. I haven't really considered these opportunities. This isn't something I thought was for me, it's not something I've considered. I'm not really aware of what a job like this looks like. Nature of the career came through quite strongly, so this was things like whether it's compatible with family life in the future for most of our students, and the challenges that might arise as part of this career. What challenges might they encounter working as a farm animal vet? Experiences people had, and so whether their education made them feel prepared for it. Often their lack of experience, and I guess what was most difficult to read as someone who loves teaching this to vet students was the negative experiences that they're exposed to. And the box negative experiences doesn't look very dramatic, but when you're reading through the hundreds of responses in this survey, there are some really negative experiences that happen to people. Perceptions of self, this was around people's own identity, whether they felt like they would make it. And also, we've put discrimination in the perceptions box here, that the direct discrimination was in the negative experience. This was just a lot of perception that there would be discrimination. I'm just not going to do it because I know there's racism or sexism in these communities and in this sector, so I just don't want to put myself through that. So not direct experiences, but things that they perceived were common. And then relationships were really powerful. Relationships with vets, relationships with farmers could be positive and negative, but those relationships were really influential. And then a theme that, I guess it's more of a description than a theme, but there were also lots of respondents saying, well, there's no perceived barriers, there's no issue here. They tended to be white men, but lots of people who perceive that there isn't an issue. And I think that's important to consider. People like me thinking, oh, this is a historic problem, it doesn't happen anymore. It does. Some of us just don't notice it because it doesn't affect us. So just for the last couple of minutes, wanted to just bring in some quotes because I think they really bring it alive. These are on the more mild end of the spectrum of what some of our students said, but this top left comment, fellow male vet students have made joking comments that my size and sex will mean I can't do it. And I think this is an important thing to consider. I think we perceive sometimes that young people are much better at these sorts of topics than we are, but they're not immune to all the biases that exist in society. And sometimes what might feel like a bit of a joke in a community of vet students can have a really big impact on some people that were considering it. I think another example I had more recently was talking back in Alberta to one of our students from an Indigenous background, who was saying that whenever there's Indigenous events at the school, the rural students we've encouraged to come and study there that want to go back to rural communities to study. So I don't need to go there. There's no diversity in the community I'm going back to. It's not relevant to me. And this student was explaining the impact that had on them and how that makes her feel less willing to go and work in a rural community. Thinking about Dr. Biggs talk about the importance of mentorship, a student replied, "I've personally never met or been taught by a farm vet who isn't white." So visible role models, visible mentors that look like the students are really valuable. I've heard from numerous people that they don't trust vets who haven't been in the field for long, don't have a background in the field. I've also heard farmers say that they wouldn't trust non-meeting vets, so that further limits my options. And I think we just need to think about it as societal attitudes are changing. Just because you choose not to eat beef doesn't mean you can't look after cattle well. And we know veganism, vegetarianism is increasing. Lots of veterinary students are in this group. We should be making them feel welcome. They give us a perspective on the sector that perhaps is lacking sometimes. A long-term concern is that large animal practice does not appear to facilitate women starting a family. I think some practices manage this really well, but people see this. We need to think as a sector about if this is a myth, how do we dispel it? If it's not a myth, how can we change working practices? And on the left here, sometimes I think being a woman and of mixed heritage is difficult. Not that I couldn't be a good farm vet, but I'm not sure I could deal with farmers potentially making comments in the way I've already experienced. I thought about this, and it's just going to be too difficult and stressful for me. And we need to think about how we overcome that. So to try and finish with a bit of discussion, I think that the key take-home messages here are most marginalised groups feel less able to pursue a career in farm practice. The biases that exist in society are reflected in our sector as well, at least in the UK. Many non-marginalised groups don't see an issue. This hasn't gone away, it's not over, it isn't going to go away in 5 years' time, even if we don't see it ourselves. And I think the plea I'd make to you all is to just consider what can we all do to make people feel more welcome in our sector. I think we talk a lot, and I hear people say all the time, well, maybe we just need to let more men into vet school. Maybe we just need more farmers' sons, maybe farmers' daughters, and then all the problems would go away. But these people are already at vet school. They are ready to enter the workplace, and we're subliminally giving these messages that it's not really for them, and we just need to attract other people. So I'd ask everyone to consider the language they use in this. Does your vet practice website need to advertise how half the vets were from a farm background? Or do we not need to mention that? Maybe it's not relevant. So please think of something you can do to make more people feel welcome. I'd like to thank you all for listening, but like I said, I'd really like to thank my colleagues who conducted most of this work, and my colleagues at Nottingham, where I did this work, and my new colleagues at the University of Calgary. And just to finish off, if anyone would like to see the survey in more details, to adapt it or use it, you can access both the papers here. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Remnan. Very important topic in this room. Please, we have 3 minutes for questions. The microphone is yours. Any questions? No? The attitude is everything. Much more for learning in the life science. Important topic discussed here. Thank you, Professor Remnan. Okay, the following scientific conference is Global Perspectives on Education of Veterinary Students on Antimicrobial Stewardship. Sarah Wood from United Kingdom.
Morning, everybody. My name's Sarah Wood, and I'm from the University of Bristol in the UK. And I'm excited to get this opportunity to talk to you about some global perspectives on the education of veterinary students on antimicrobial stewardship. So the plan for this session, this time that we've got together, I'm going to give you a little bit of background and context to this topic, and then present two different methods to explore this topic in more detail. First using a literature review, and then some work that we've been doing at Bristol Veterinary School. And then I'll work through the results of both of those aspects to hopefully give you some perspectives on this topic. And then at the end, a little bit of time for some conclusions, and hopefully some sort of reflections that you can take back into your own teaching and interactions with students. So I hope I'm talking to a room where this is a well-acknowledged topic already, but in case you need some food for thought or some prompting on this, I hope you can all identify that antimicrobial resistance is a challenge that's uniting us all as production animal veterinarians. Whether that's because we need medications that we can use to treat our patients when it's necessary, or whether that's because the impact that we have on treating our patients has ongoing effects on human health as well. But I'm sure you can agree it's an important topic that us as production animal veterinarians need to have close to our hearts. Antimicrobial stewardship, I hope it's a term that you've come across, but antimicrobial stewardship is basically the tools that we have in order to tackle the issue of antimicrobial resistance. So this may be identifying which cases are appropriate to use antimicrobials for, appropriate selection of antimicrobial products, so choosing the right products for the right cases, and then using those correctly as well. So choosing the right dose, the right duration of activity, and all of those elements. And again, as production animal vets, this will also be something that we need to be able to communicate to our clients and help them make responsible decisions as well. So veterinary education of our veterinary students must ensure that they're prepared to make these prescribing decisions when they graduate. So in the UK, the minute they leave our care, the minute they leave vet school, they are making these decisions day in, day out if they're working in practice. So it's compulsory that we cover this within our curricula. And as you can see, it's already been stated in the guidelines that we follow when we put together our curricula that we must cover this topic. So for example, on the left there, that's the World Organization for Animal Health guidelines for sort of global veterinary curricula. And it's clearly stated there that we need to be talking about judicious use of antimicrobials and processes by which antimicrobial resistance develops. In the middle there, that's the CPVs, that's the American Association's competencies. And again, it's very clear there that we need to be teaching responsible prescribing practices and responsible use of antimicrobial agents. And then on the right, close to home for me, that's the UK's Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Day 1 competencies. And again, they're really clear. There's only 40 of these, and it's really clear there that prescribing and dispensing medicines correctly is a key competency that needs to be taught in the undergraduate education. So there's no question there that we need to be covering it and that we're being held to cover this when our curricula are reviewed. But my question was, and my area of interest, the research that I've been doing, is to see whether we're succeeding. Are we sufficiently preparing our graduates to make responsible decisions and follow processes of antimicrobial stewardship as they move out into clinical practice? So my starting point for this was a review of the peer-reviewed literature using a kind of structured search terms. And as you can see, there's a good wealth of data out there. I said good wealth of data out there to my colleagues at home, and they said that's not much, 19 papers. But I thought, we should be pretty pleased to have 19 papers on this topic. And actually, that's quite a structured search, and a lot of these papers follow quite similar methodologies and ask some quite similar questions. So it's a really great opportunity to gather a nice bit of data here on this topic. I've grouped these by continent, and I'm going to kind of have a little look at these in a bit more detail. You might notice there that there's no papers from South America. And obviously, being in this room, it'd be interesting to hear perhaps why that's so, why has no work come out from that area on this topic. So it'd be an interesting point for discussion, perhaps. Now, I sort of ummed and ahed with how best to present a literature review in a conference setting. It's quite difficult to make sure you have access to references, and I hope that if this is a topic that you're interested in, some of these references you might want to look at a little bit further. So this QR code will take you to an interactive map where you can get the full references, and if you have access, then you can follow the DOIs to look at the full papers. It'll keep coming up throughout if you want to look at this later on. So if we start off looking at some papers from Africa, and I'm going to go continent by continent, there's actually a lot of real shared conclusions that I'll draw together at the end, but just to give you some detail from the papers that are out there. But like I say, there's a lot of shared outcomes here. So there are a couple of lovely papers that have come from Nigeria and South Africa, and these used a survey-based approach to speak to their veterinary students and find out what the knowledge and perceptions on antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship are. Concerningly, 25% of students, and these were final year students in South Africa, stated that their knowledge of antimicrobial stewardship, so the responsible prescribing concepts, was poor. And also, concerningly, in a different paper from South Africa, there was a disparity between the training they'd received, the lectures, the clinical material, the clinical teaching they received, and then the field application that they were seeing. Pleasingly, in the paper from Nigeria, it was nice to see that there was improved knowledge and awareness of contributory factors in final years, so there was an effective education to prepare them and to give them confidence in this topic. And great to see they had a willingness to learn about this topic, a willingness to engage with this topic, which is, reassuring in our graduates. Moving over to North America, a study in Canada used focus groups to explore the topic, and they were able to demonstrate that the students had an excellent awareness of antimicrobial resistance and the impact that responsible prescribing can have. And they cited the media as playing quite an important part in this, I guess out of our control in our veterinary curricula, but great to see that had seeded into the students. It was useful here to see the students commenting on how they would like to receive this material and things that supported their education. And they suggested a preference for things like infographics or fact sheets, so some resources they can use and refer to, which support their learning, but again, importantly, as us working with clients, may also support client education and how they share this information with clients. In another North American study from Cornell, actually there was low confidence in their knowledge surrounding antimicrobial use, with only 1 of 24 students having read guidelines on antimicrobial stewardship. Looking across to Asia, and we had a couple of papers from here, there was a really nice impact of the curriculum shown in Bangladesh vet schools, where there was improved knowledge later in the course. But concerningly, a third of students didn't know that antibiotics were not effective against viruses. And similarly, in Pakistan, only 54% recognized that antibiotics didn't work against viruses. But in both studies, there was a good awareness of antimicrobial resistance, and gaps identified, which may contribute to why poor antimicrobial stewardship practices might occur in the future. A wide-ranging survey in Australia by Hardfelt and all looked at their veterinary students and showed they had, again, a good knowledge of antimicrobial resistance. They used case scenarios to identify if students could make good prescribing decisions, and again, they were able to appropriately avoid the use of antimicrobials in certain case scenarios. However, when asked in more detail about the content of their curriculum, only 34% thought that the pharmacology teaching was adequate. And again, we've got this issue of lectures matching clinical teaching, and only 20% saying that actually the content of the lecture material was mapping what they were seeing in practice. And then close to home for me, a really nice study across 30 countries in Europe, where actually they were able to show that knowledge on clinical use was actually better than on antimicrobial resistance mechanisms. And here it was really nice to see that clinical placements, time in the field, had improved their preparedness for clinical use, although it hadn't really helped them with antimicrobial resistance. And again, we've got this desire for more information. 70% desired improved teaching on antimicrobial stewardship, and a concerning lack of awareness on guidelines for rational use, which is particularly concerning in Europe, where we do have quite a lot of guidelines, I guess in some countries more than others. So just to touch on the second part of this work, where we try to identify how we're doing preparing our graduates, and this is some work we did at Bristol Vet School. We used a survey that the Australian team had used with our veterinary students. This was a combination of the survey that they used, but then we knew we needed to delve into more depth, so we used some focus groups as well to explore the topics in more detail. I'm not going to go through all the results here, obviously, in this last couple of minutes, but just to try and pick out some key findings to kind of further illustrate this point, and then I'll bring it all together into some conclusions. So in this graph, you can see some commonly used antibiotics along the bottom there, and we've classified them. At the time that we were doing this work, we were classifying them first and second line, but hopefully a lot of you are familiar with the EMA categorization, so I've just added that in as well. And then up the left-hand side of the graph, you can see the percentage of students that were correctly categorizing these antibiotics. And as you can see, our students were pretty aware of what they can be using first line, what the first line options are that they can be reaching for. But they didn't do so well identifying what was second line, what was third line, what they really shouldn't be using in food animals. So that was slightly concerning. What were the protective antibiotics? They knew protected antibiotics were a thing, but which ones should they not be using? We then also presented them with some case scenarios, again, like in the Australia paper. So again, you can see some kind of commonly encountered scenarios for production animal vets along the bottom. And then the red is students identifying that they would rarely or never prescribe antibiotics. And the blue is those that always or frequently would have prescribed antibiotics for these cases. What's really interesting in this graph is we also had a don't know option. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not graduated yet. I don't know if I'd give antibiotics. Our students very rarely chose that category. They were confident in their decision making and they were plumping one way or the other. Now you can see some of our students were making good decisions, and hopefully you'd agree with the decisions that were made here. So for cases like a calf with a septic joint or a toxic mastitis where antibiotics would commonly be used in practice, the students were also making decisions similarly. And then at the other end of the scale, where we would often avoid antibiotics, so for example, a lot of lame cows wouldn't need antibiotics, or for a calf with diarrhea, again, a lot of them were making a good decision there. But we had a few cases in the middle that were meeting this kind of mixed opinion, and so we were able to delve into that a little bit more in the focus groups and try and identify why we were getting this mix of opinions. So looking at the focus groups and just thinking about some of our qualitative data, I'm just going to pick out just a couple of really key themes that came out of our qualitative data. So teaching in our veterinary school focused very heavily on which antimicrobials to avoid. So they knew that responsible use was a thing. We must not use the protected antibiotics. So they felt that it was good that they had a list that you really shouldn't be using, but actually our students were saying, I still don't really know what I'm actually supposed to use. I just know not to use the protected ones. And building on this, they described that they had a lack of preparedness for decision-making on prescribing. So they talked about the fact that selecting the right product when you're looking in a box of a handful of antibiotics and looking at the trade names and trying to make a decision is a hard one. So actually, again, they've got an awareness of antibiotics, but actually pinning down what they're actually going to give from the back of their vehicle and being overwhelmed by trade names and deciding what's what there was difficult for them. And finally, similar to some of the other work, we also found that we had this mismatch between some of the basic sciences and then some of the clinical teaching as well. So again, a lovely quote from one of our students here. I think if I'd been taught about the pharmacological aspects of the drugs, of how the drugs work, when I was learning about when to use them and how, and for what cases to use them, then I think it would have stuck better. So just to draw this all together into some conclusions to finish off, and I hope there'll be some things here that you can reflect upon, maybe look back at your own curriculum, or if your practitioner's working in practice, think about how you can be supporting the undergraduate students or the prospective vet students that come with you when you're working on cases where antimicrobials are used. So it is pleasing to see that antimicrobial stewardship, awareness of antimicrobial stewardship improves over the course of the veterinary curriculum. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that there do seem to be some instances where teaching in placements, so teaching in the field, and whatever experience that might be as part of the vet school's curricula, or whether that's additional placements that students go on, doesn't map lecture material. Now, our perception on this isn't that there are conflicting contradictions or something like that, but perhaps in lecture material we need to further describe what the options are that are out there and why different options may be chosen. And similarly, for practitioners in the field, try and describe your decision-making. Why did you come to giving that? And I bet the two do marry up. It's just the students are perhaps seeing things in black and white. I saw that antibiotic given. That wasn't on the list my lecturer gave. The two don't match up. I think, again, a key take-home, and I really hope that you might be able to go back and influence the curricula in your institutions, is that there is scope for more teaching on antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship. The students across the world have shown a desire for more education on this topic, and knowing that this is such an important topic for our profession, you know, we need to be improving the teaching on this topic. Thinking about that a little bit further, beyond just saying we need to do more of this, actually if we can tie it in with some of the basic sciences, tie it in with the pharmacology and the preclinical teaching, hopefully students have kind of advised that that might help it cement better. So for example, at Bristol, we do things like case-based learning, where we're bringing in those real-life cases alongside the preclinical teaching, and that can be a really useful way of cementing some of these concepts. And again, as it came out of the literature, some of those resources, visual aids, infographics can be really useful to try and support this as well. And finally, there's a lot of guidance out there already, so are we doing a good job of signposting to them? Our students at Bristol wanted more resources, they wanted more lists to give them some confidence in their prescribing, and again, we saw this in the other literature as well. So if it doesn't exist, what more resources could we create to support this? But in a lot of regions, there are some really great, so in Europe generally, we have some great resources that we can be signposting to demonstrate what responsible prescribing looks like, and we should be better signposting this in our teaching. And again, for practitioners to be aware of and to signpost would be really useful. So thank you very much for listening. This work was part of my grant from CIVME, an MSD as well. So thank you to them for the sponsorship of this work. And yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I hope there's been some food for thought there for you.
We thank you, Dr. Sarah Wood, her conference. I invite you to present your question to Dr. Sarah Wood, please. Any questions?
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Lina Doresa, University of Calgary. I was wondering, whenever we're making decisions from a veterinary standpoint, we also always have the other side, right? What are your thoughts on how we can support our students best to prepare for those discussions that they might have with the farmer?
Do you mean like the impact of the farmer and their impact on the decision making for the client? Yeah. So again, I think that's where practitioners can play such an important role in describing their decision making and commenting on the influence of it. I think knowing that our producers, our clients will have drugs on farm and they'll be making some selections, you know, it is on us to make sure that we are educating them. But I think it's perfectly acceptable, and there's some lovely work out there looking at the impacts on prescribing decisions that, on veterinarians, you know, after graduation. And I think acknowledging that it does play a part in the prescribing decision and voicing that decision making is all part of the discussions that we need to be having in preclinical teaching and in clinical teaching. We don't need to be saying, this is the right answer, this is the gold standard. We can be saying, well, you're also going to need to consider the context, the producer, the client's wishes. We can discuss all of this, and hopefully that discussion helps them build confidence in their decision making. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for a really interesting talk. I suppose my question's a bit cheeky. It's that the students are leaving vet school often quite, you know, with great intentions about antimicrobial stewardship. Do you think there's a place for improving the education of vets in practice to make sure that their practice doesn't get modified when they go into the real world?
That's such a good point. Thank you so much for making that point. And again, got lovely data from our focus groups where they did talk about, well, I know what to do now, but actually if my boss says do X, Y, or Z, I'll just do that. I guess the team at Bristol, this is a topic close to the heart of the team at Bristol, and you know, they've been working to try and do that kind of outreach about education of practitioners. I'm also hoping, I guess my interest is in education, and I'm kind of hoping that this next generation, giving our next generation confidence, they're confident to then have these discussions with those in practice with them as well, and hopefully have confidence in their decision making to say this is why we need to make these decisions, and yeah, have the top communication skills to make that a useful conversation. I'm sure there is a place for education of those in practice, and I think you know as well as I do that it is about, you know, engaging with people, and a lot of people are very engaged and come along and discuss this at workshops and conferences, and others don't. But I think there's still, there's a huge amount of work we could do in the UK and globally, and I think this conference has shown that as well in some of the conversations I've been involved in. Yeah, thank you for your question.
We have a couple minutes for one more question, please.
Hi,
Do you think there's any responsibility from the pharmaceutical companies to help with the education not only of the veterinary students but also of the vets in practice?
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? And it would be lovely to think that we could be doing this more collaboratively. Yeah, obviously there's a huge amount of outreach that's going on, huge amount of education and CPD, continued professional development that's going on in practices. And whether we could be doing more to work with pharmaceutical companies to try and get these messages across. I think there are elements of that happening already, but I think there's always more we could do, isn't it, to make it a key topic of conversation.
I feel it still feels quite like siloed, and actually everybody should really just be talking to each other.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if we can bring that into our undergraduate education as well, and actually if there are pharmaceutical companies who are keen to support some of those discussions, I think that would be well placed as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Sarah Wood. Great topic. The following scientific conference is Rapid and Efficient BVDV Control in Large Industrial Dairy Farm using various diagnostic toolkits in Hungary, Central Europe. Professor Attila Dobos from Hungary.
You are welcome. Thank you very much the opportunity for my presentation. Unfortunately, it's my presentation or my topic is a little bit far for the education, but it's the first point. I try to involve my student, my son, who is, I hope, is graduated this year, so maybe he really enjoyed to involve to this topic. And I would like to introduce another colleague as well from Hungary, István. He can work at the Siva Philaxia in Budapest. And I work at the Siva Philaxia as well, but I have a part-time job at the University of Vet Science and University of Vet Science in Czechia in Brno. So a little bit I would like to introduce, maybe you know not so well as a Central Europe, so maybe I came from Hungary, maybe you know Budapest and Prague is very important destination from the US and from another country. We are really the Central Europe. So, and after that we can talk about university. So it's generally in Central Europe just in one country has just only one university, in Budapest, in Košice in Slovakia, in Prague, so maybe, and after that sometimes I involved to Croatia, to Zagreb. So, and after that this is the situation. Come back to this topic, is about how is the rapid, efficient eradication of BVDV in our countries. So BVDV is a very well-known, well-researched topic. So the BVDV causes significant economic losses in everywhere in all of countries. But it's nowadays is mostly in Europe there is no acute BVDV outbreaks due to the successful eradication programs in these countries. So this disease is rather stealthy. So it means the farmers generally is not observe the disease, so sometimes it's overlooked or it's not realized, it's just some economic problem has in the farm, so maybe it's some reproduction problem. There is the farmers and veterinarians suspect there is a disease. So in EU countries, as Hungary and Central European countries, some countries has some voluntary and some of them is mandatory BVD eradication program. We can define as two types of programs, is a Scandinavian models where the countries that there is just a small family farms is introduced, the Scandinavian model without vaccination. In Central and Eastern Europe we have a big industrial farms. So mostly I would like to introduce Hungarian situation. In Hungary there is no mandatory BVDV eradication program, just a voluntary, but the disease is very important in this area. The cattle population is Hungary and the Central European countries, mostly the dairy cattle countries, not the beef. In Hungary there is a 250,000 milking cows. We have a 400, more or less 400 farms. The average number of the cows, milking cows at the farms, is the highest in all of Europe. We have more than 32 big farms, big industrial farms, which operated more than 1,000 cows, sometimes 3,000, 4,000 cows as well. So in this case, it's not so easy to eradicate the disease. And nowadays, the tendencies over the 10 years, that is the number of animals is decreasing, but there is a huge concentration. In this case, as I mentioned, big industrial farms operated many cows. So, as I mentioned, no mandatory eradication program in Hungary, and after that we faced in Central Europe that it's sometimes the program and control program is unsuccessful. And I would like to introduce why is important the quick eradication of the disease and how can we solve this problem. There are only one big farms with more or less 900 milking cows plus 800 heifers. Is a middle-sized farm in Central Europe, and this farm is never vaccinated against BVDV, and no animals enter the farm through the investigation period. Generally, the heifer replacement solved by own the farm. It's not entered any animals to this farm. We use this is the material and methods. We use the qPCR, commercial available qPCR, and we subtyping of the genotyping of the detected BVDV virus from the farm, as we use the partial nucleotide sequence of the EMPRO coding of genomic region. And after that, we follow up and check the all newborn calves in 1 year period. So by commercial available ELISA and qPCR as well, is more or less, its length is 1 year. And my friend who can work at the farm as a veterinarian, but just another comment, in Central Europe there is no large animal practice really like in UK. For example, I work in UK many years, but there's a large animal practice. In Central Europe, generally 1, 2, 3 vets who employed by the farms. So maybe it's a good opportunity to improve the knowledge and focus just only one big farms. This is the situation. So come back the topic. So, and after that we took a blood sample with my friend and my son, as well as I mentioned, in 18th and 19th of January last year in 2 days. It was a huge work, but it was important because it's, as I mentioned, is the main obstacle, the time to eradicate the disease. And we decide we can do it in 2 days. We prepared 63 pool, so and 25 animals was in one pool, and we checked the results. Is generally we found 21 PI animals in the total herd at the same time, and this PI animal promptly removed and eliminate. Of course, is we eliminated the direct source of the viral infection, and after that the farm began using the live attenuated attenuated BVD vaccine, because as I mentioned, in a big industrial farm without vaccination, the proper control program doesn't work. So maybe I could see many farms that it's try to eliminate PI animals and vaccinate, and after that finally, after 5 and 6 years, find another PI animals. So maybe we decided the quick eradication program. So, and as I mentioned, we find 1%, 33% PI animals at the farm at the same times, and epidemiological investigation is important in this case, but it's we defined the age of the PI animals. We found 11 cows between 10 and 11 months, which was important in the future investigation. We found 4 age between 7 and 8 months, and 6 age between 4 and 5 months. So it's so important that all PI animals born from Trojan dam. That's why it's important. If without this investigation, generally we don't know if the Trojan animals, we don't know just after born. So maybe if we could find this animal, maybe we investigated, as the first cases was coming from the PI Trojan animals from the farm, for the farms. That's why this only one animals was the gestation period between 30 days and 150 days, when the PI animals is cause immune tolerant. So, and we could find several diseases. So, as the first one, as everybody knows, the PI animals many times is smaller, so hairy. So you could see these ages between 10 and 11, and this animals is smaller, much smaller. It's weak calves, so it's the generally, as I mentioned, the BVD is rather stealthy and cause immunosuppression, and after that it's another secondary infection is increasing, like a BRD complex, for example, and we can find that it's in the background there is a BVD, as you can see, some pulmonary problem, respiratory problem, and after that diarrhea, and we could find mucosal disease. So I can talk about later about mucosal disease. So, and after that, when we promptly removed all PI animals from the farm, we can investigate every 2-3 weeks the all newborn cows. So, and after that, we could find in August the last PI animals. So, and after that, it was a, as you can see it with the red box, is how many PI animals we found. So through the investigation period, which is more or less 1 year, we found 28 PI animals, which is more than 5%. So we can see that the disease is really spread. That's why it's the first time we could find just 1.33%, and during the investigation period we found more than 5% PI animals. So it's, of course, is quickly removed as well. So what is so important as well, we genotype. We found the subtype 1B. This subtype was detected, and we, in Central Europe, we genotyped a lot of BVD subtype virus. So maybe 1B, 1D, and 1F subtype we found, and you can find these 3, and this is the farm, as I mentioned, as we investigated. which is interesting. It was a farm between Slovak and Hungary and border. We found two subtypes as well, 1B and 1F in the same farm, which is so interesting. And after that we investigate. As I mentioned, we found mucosal disease, and it needs to presence both biotypes, CP and non-cytopathogenic virus, which has met, and after that is caused the mucosal disease. So virus neutralization test is very important, helpful test to check the vaccine efficacy. So there are several publications about it. That's why the vaccine is not efficient against some subtypes. We use the homologous origin C24 subtype, which is subtypes 1A strain. And after that is the some publication wrote that is 120 where this one is reported as a cross-protective. So, and after that we checked the titer, and after that is we used the 5 native cows which never vaccinated, and it was practically BVD free, and we vaccinated with the vaccine subtypes. Of course there is a huge titer as you can see, and after that we isolated 1B subtype. Is a non-cytopathogenic form and cytopathogenic form. As you can see the average titer. So, and after that it's much higher than 1 and 20, and after that this vaccine was very efficient and it was so phytoprotective. So, which is so important. This is the big farms has a lot of susceptible cows. The gestation period between 30 days and 150 days, when the immune tolerant cows is born. So maybe that's why so important the phytoprotection in the big farms. So it's generally, if there is a 2,000, 3,000 cows in the big farms, it's generally more than 200, 300 cows, which is so susceptible to the BVDV. As I mentioned, we checked the cytopathogenic effect, so we found the cytopathogen virus as well, and non-cytopathogenic, and after that there is a mucosal disease. And as just we use Medin Derby bovine kidney cells and staining with immunofluorescence, as you can see, but it's just a native picture, but it's maybe it needs to staining with immunofluorescent. So that's why it's so important for the eradication. And conclusion, in a big industrial farm, it needs the quick eradication, but of course it's the cost is a little bit high. That's why if we can investigate all animals of the farms by PCR and ELISA, is generally the cost is high, but the result is very quick. So that's why it's so important, and big farms is important, the vaccination, to find the effective vaccine which is able to because it's a three corners of the eradication: find the PI animals and eliminate immediately. And second one, effective vaccination. Of course, it's important, the strength biosecurity measures as well. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have some questions, don't hesitate. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay here 1 moment. Great and big word, no? It's very, very interesting, your research, Professor Dobos. Please, questions?
Hello, great talk, and I guess working with your son would be a pleasure. You say that you have like 5% of PI in newborn calves. You have another studies, you have seen it before, it's like common or not? Or is the first time you do it?
So maybe at the first time, we found just 1.33%. And after that, we realized that the disease is spread. And, during the 1 year, we found 5%. So maybe it means if we are not solve this problem, the disease is spread and more. And maybe without any vaccination, remove PI animals, maybe it will be more and more PI animals. So that's why it's so important, the quick eradication, quick solve the problem.
Perfect. And then you use, all the semen you use is free of BVDV, it's checked and you have the stamp that certifies free from BVDV. That's not a problem for you.
That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for interesting case scenario. So my question is, what was the procedure for the calf testing after the whole herd testing, and how long did you do that? Was it just 1 year, or you are still continuing it, or what's the...
So, and after that, as I mentioned, we tested the whole farm immediately. It's just we can use the SERA. It's not a ear notch, it's a SERA, so maybe sometimes it's better and easier to perform. It's 2 days. We tested the whole farms, and after that is the all newborn calf investigated in a 1 year period. So, and after that, as you could see, we found the last PI animals in August. So after the eradication of 6 months, and after that we cannot find. So of course, how can we continue? This is the question maybe. As we can vaccinate the whole herd all the time. So, and after that, we can see the sentinel animals. It's whether it's possible the virus is circulated in the farm, but there is no PI animal, but maybe it's possible the virus in the farm. At the procedure today, we can check the 10 sentinel animals. There is an antibody or not. This is what happened now.
Yeah, because according to the recommendations, it's you should continue testing the calves at least 1 year after you find the PI animal. So my concern is whether you stopped a bit too early.
It's not stopped. We can continue. I'm sorry,
calf testing.
Just we can
calf
continue.
Testing.
Yes, we can continue.
And also the second question was, which calves were actually tested? Heifer calves, bull calves, stillborn calves, abortions? Because the recommendation is actually to cover them all to get insight into what is happening. Is the virus still circulating? And then you can even prognose the eradication time based on that.
Yes, we can test both bull and heifers as well. So of course, and we can investigate the abortion. So maybe it's a total program. Of course, it's we presume that there is no PI animals in the herd, but of course we take care of that. We need to test all the time. So in this case, I could find, in other cases, we could find the bull is not tested. And after that, we cannot find that the dam was the PI, because the bull never tested, and the dam was PI as well. So maybe it's so interesting. In this case, it's very important to test bull and heifers all together.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dobos. Great work. The following scientific conference is Effects of Communication Training on Veterinaries Motivational Interviewing, Adherent and Not Adherent Behavior Excess Behavior Holding Recordings will be given Linda Dorenstein from Canada.
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you being here. I'm aware that I'm in steep competition with travel and the beach, so it's good to see you all here.
My name is Lina Dorsa, and I will be presenting some of my work from my PhD on the effects of communication training on motivational interviewing behavior in veterinarians. So to start off with, what is motivational interviewing? It might be a new theme for some of you. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication where we specifically look at strengthening the personal motivation of the farmers for a specific change. We're looking at their own reasons to change, and we're coming from a standpoint of acceptance and compassion. And we've seen some work in motivational interviewing from colleagues in Bristol and colleagues in the Nordics. And we've seen that veterinarians are able to improve those communication skills that are part of motivational interviewing after training. And we also see, which makes it so important, is that we see that farmers are more likely to talk about actually changing their behavior on their farms. Because we know, and we've seen at this conference, at the wonderful presentations, we have so much knowledge as veterinarians. But at the same time, oftentimes we see that the farmers just don't do it, or they just don't get it. But maybe we don't get our farmers. So that is what motivational interviewing looks at. What is the motivation of the farmer to change, and how can we guide them towards that change? The studies that have been done so far are mostly performed with simulated clients, simulated farmers, actors. And we don't exactly know what the effect of communication training is on motivational interviewing skills in veterinarians in real life herd health visits. So that was the objective of this particular study, to look at the effects of various communication education interventions on the motivational interviewing competencies in dairy veterinarians. So this is a longitudinal randomized controlled trial, part of my PhD. We've been working with 4 different groups. A control group who didn't have any training, they still got the training at the end of our study period. Then we have a group that had a series of webinars. This was all collected during COVID, so unfortunately in-person training wasn't feasible at the moment. Then we have a group of veterinarians who did a asynchronous self-study with the veterinary dialogue trainer, which is an online avatar. You can see him on the screen. His name is Andrew, and these veterinarians are able to practice their conversations with Andrew, and at the end of these online conversations, they will get personalized feedback on the options, the dialogue options that they picked. And then we had a blended group who both had the webinar and the asynchronous training with Andrew. We collected a whole wealth of data, and what we're looking at in this presentation is a snippet. It's preliminary data. I'm currently working on the manuscripts, and we are looking at 2 different aspects of motivational interviewing. One of them is the global scores. So the people that rated these recordings for me, wonderful students at Ghent University, they looked at the general gestalt, as they say, so the general idea that they got on partnership, empathy and listening, and I will get back to the definitions of those. And they looked at motivational interviewing, adherent and non-adherent behavior, and I will get back to those as well. So for the study design, all of the groups started with a baseline recording in phase 1 of the study. I hope to submit that manuscript next month. And then what we're looking at in this talk is what happened after the intervention that the webinar group had and the blended group had in the 3rd period, and what happened with the dialogue trainer group and the control group as well. So for your idea, looking at the global scores of motivational interviewing, when we're looking at partnership, we're looking at in the extent to which the veterinarian shows the farmer, we are in this together. I want to make a plan with you that works best for your farm. If we're looking at the empathy scores, we're looking at, okay, so I can understand why you're upset with the current state of new legislation or how your calves are doing. You're really trying to grasp the farmer's perspective. And when we're looking at the listening score, and it's mostly, obviously, these were audio recordings. So we're looking at, did the veterinarian interrupt the farmer when they were talking? How much time was the veterinarian talking? How much time was the farmer talking? And all of these were on an ordinal scale from 1 to 5, in which 3 was the midpoint, where we saw a mixed image of all. So looking at the results that we had, there were 28 veterinarians that participated in my study, of whom 4 were female. And you can see that we had a whole wealth of experience. Some people only relatively recently graduated, and some have been in the field for quite a while. And they had various experience with previous communication training. They were able to audio record 353 herd health visits of, in general, 1.5 hours of duration. Some of them were 4 hours, some of them were 5 hours. Imagine my lovely coders who listened to all of that audio. They visited 218 unique farmers, and the working relationship of these veterinarians was about 2 to 24 years with these specific farmers. For about 80% of the visits, the coders were able to code them. We lost some of the recordings because sometimes there was a bit too strong of a dialect in either the farmer or the farmer and the veterinarian together. Sometimes the fans in the barn were just very loud. Sometimes they were talking in the milking parlor, so we might have lost a little bit there. But in general, 80% of visits were audible. And for about half of them, we had a conversation that was talking about change or advice. So we defined that as a conversation of at least 5 minutes to maximum 20 minutes on a particular change for that farm. That might be starting a vaccination, that might be on antimicrobial use. And for this part of the work, we looked at recordings for veterinarians of whom we had a pre-intervention, so pre-training recordings and post-intervention recordings. And then you can already see where the challenges start to come in, because looking at pre and post, we had 150 recordings left of those original 353. And they were available for 16 of the 28 vets, 3 from the control group, 3 from the webinar group, and 5 for both the dialogue trainer and blended groups. So let's go over to the results, starting with the partnership. We could see that for all groups, they were all kind of around that midpoint. So they were, luckily, they weren't bad. They weren't actively bad in partnership. So they were trying to make that partnership with the farmer. We don't really see big differences between the groups. And the same shows for empathy, and the same shows for listening. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the groups are very similar in the pre and post scores. What I found interesting is that it seems that the blended group starts off just a little bit higher than the other groups and finishes a little bit higher as well. But since we're on a 5-point scale, these are really minor differences. And due to these small numbers, we haven't performed the statistics just yet. We might look at the individual veterinarians at some point and see what that means for an individual veterinarian, these specific trainings. And now I'm going to lead you through this table. We're looking at motivational adherent behavior. So that is a veterinarian that emphasizes you are the farmer, this is your farm. Ultimately, you are going to make the decision. So empathizing the autonomy of that farmer. Seeking collaboration, and that would be a statement of a veterinarian saying, I'm here for you, how can I help you in fighting this disease, or how can I support you in this specific matter? And affirmation is affirming a positive trait of a farmer. And that would be something like saying, I can appreciate that you already took some steps in the right direction. So affirming the positive things that the farmer has within themselves or has already performed. And what we're seeing here, we would like to see an improve in that behavior after the training, right? Because we have trained them in those skills. And we see in both the webinar group and the blended intervention group that there is some positive change. So we're going to look in more depth at those data. And then moving over to the other side, to the non-adherent behavior, that would be when you as a veterinarian would be persuading or even confronting a farmer with, for example, a statement of, well, you know this is not going to work. That would be non-adherent behavior. And ideally, we would want to see a decrease in that behavior after the training. And we are seeing that in the control group, surprisingly, and in the blended group as well. And as you can see, another interesting fact was that the webinar group improved those behaviors. So that really shows another challenge of, hey, we have small numbers, so we need to look in depth at this data to see at the veterinarian level what difference does it make. So to conclude, what we see is that MI research in real-life herd health conversations is hard, and small numbers and effect sizes demonstrate that complexity. At the same time, listening to my veterinarians and hearing them say, well, I've been talking to this specific farmer for 10 years already to start a specific vaccination strategy, and now applying these skills, I felt that I could connect better with my farmer, and they've actually started that program. Yes, that is only one veterinarian, but that is one veterinarian with a farmer where it counts and where there's a whole herd of cattle that might be benefited from this intervention. And what we saw, even though the training did not seem to change those global scores, it's very good to recognize that a lot of these veterinarians have been supported in thinking, hey, wait a minute, partnership is important. I cannot only info dump on my farmers. I need to make sure that we're on a team together. Now, we might see some possible changes in both MI adherent and MI non-adherent behavior, and that is what I'm diving into the next few months. And what is very promising is that some of these skills, especially affirming behavior, it's not in everyone's nature to hand out compliments. It's not in everyone's nature to affirm, hey, what you've been doing is really good. Because all of us, we've been trained to spot the one lame cow in the herd. But complimenting that farmer, oh my goodness, your cows are so clean, that really helps. That really helps. So we're really seeing that those high-level skills, it's good that they're being applied, and further research and a very deep dive in the data is needed to see in the future what this might bring to our veterinarians, to our farmer, and the cattle that they're tending to. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Dorenstein. important topic of indeed a study of professional and client internship with veterinary science. Congratulations, Dr. Dorenstein. We have time for questions, please. Okay, Dr. Dorenstein, thank you.
Can I just ask the technical team to have the last slide up again? Because I have a QR code for you on a publication that we had out last year. If you are curious to learn more about that veterinary dialogue trainer, to see how that might work in real life, you can see have a look at the paper, and then we included a link where you can try a scenario yourself. That one, yes, please. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's move on the LAGS conference this morning. The title is, What are the day on skill requirements for future farms vet? Will be given by, again, Sarah Wood from United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present this talk. This is my real pet topic that I've spent the last couple of years looking at, so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to this room. It's been a long morning, it's been some really interesting talks, but I hope maybe this will leave us with some food for thought as we go back to our practices and institutions. So I'm Sarah Wood, but I did this project with a team at Bristol, so I'd like to acknowledge them as well. So what I'm going to go through in this short period of time is just to talk a little bit about how we came to be doing this project. I'll talk you through the methods, because I think they're quite interesting. We'll have a good amount of time looking at the results, and then have some thoughts on the conclusions and impacts for yourselves and back with us at Bristol. And this QR code will take you to the paper, but also if you want to engage in a bit of online discussion on this, if you're struggling for motivation at this point in the morning, you could have some chat on my discussion board if you want as well. So I am a lecturer at Bristol Vet School. I teach practicals, bovine medicine, lectures, all that sort of thing across all 5 years of our veterinary degree. And I'm sure, like some of you, I've been there next to a calf teaching them how to put a halter on, and I'm like, how do I know we're teaching the right stuff? Are we doing the right skills? Are we teaching the right skills? So these were the thoughts that were going through my head. What skills should we be teaching? What do the employers of our graduates want our students to be able to do? Are we meeting their expectations? And what's going on in first opinion practices? A little while since I graduated. Have things changed? Is it all laptops now? Do they need a different set of skills? So again, I wanted to explore that with a project. But with all the best research, it's important to focus your research question. So we focused down to just looking at cattle and sheep. That's my area of interest. And we focus specifically on day one skills, so what we need them to leave with, not perhaps what they're going to have down the line. We really specifically focused on practical skills, so please keep this in mind. I'm sure you're all very aware, communication, hugely important, but there are other people doing work on that. Knowledge, obviously, hugely important, but we wanted to focus in this project on the doing skills. And we wanted to come up with an evidence base. We're all scientists at heart. What is the evidence base? And the good way of doing that is drawing a consensus of opinion. I didn't get into the kind of areas of competencies or level of supervision, because that gets a little bit muddy, but we could talk about that separately. Now, we've had a few Delphis presented to us over the course of this conference, so hopefully some of you have heard about these already. It's a really great method for deriving consensus on a real-world topic. So particularly useful where there isn't an evidence base, and we're trying to draw together an evidence base. And I love this quote about Delphis. So it's based on the premise that pooled intelligence enhances individual judgment and captures the collective opinion of experts. So the experts in this case were practitioners in the field. The great thing about Adelphi is can be done electronically, so we can get all our lovely practitioners together from all across the UK in this scenario, but we can do that with them remotely. And the other lovely thing about it is it's all anonymous. So actually, just because you've been working in practice for 40 years or you've got a lot of letters after your name, you have equal weight to everybody else who's in the study as well, which was really important here because we wanted employers of new graduates generally. So with some Delphis, the first stage is to get practitioners or whoever the participants are to share their thoughts on skills. But this isn't a new topic, right? We're all doing some teaching. We know there are skills that are currently being taught. So we were able to go to the grey literature and see what was out there already. So we know there are lists of competencies, but if you spent any time looking at those competencies, a lot of them are quite vague. There's a lot of professional skills in there. There's not very many specific doing skills in there. We reached out to other vet schools. What are you teaching? Can you share me some lists? So we had quite a lot as a starting point. We then used focus groups with practitioners to review those lists. Did they understand the wording? Had it got a bit educationally, or did they understand the skills that were written there? Were there any missing skills and things like that? And then we went to a wider pool of farm animal practitioners for our Delphi. Delphis in general, if you look at the health sciences literature, ought to have kind of 30 or more participants, but we don't need huge numbers. That's enough to get good consensus. We used word of mouth. We also went through some national practitioner mailing lists to ensure we had really good coverage across the UK and Ireland. And we aimed for one vet per practice to make sure that we didn't have kind of confounding influence. Actually, as we found, practitioners were really engaged in this topic, and they'll see in the results that they were really keen to work with us on this, and gave us lots of good kind of feedback as well on it. So it was really great to work with them on this. So this is just a summary of what the Delphi ended up looking like. So in the first round, we took 68 practical skills to our 42 participants, and they voted on them on a Likert scale from most important through to kind of unimportant skills. Now, it's really worth emphasizing at this point, the practitioners could have given everything a 5. Everything could have been really important. It's quite reasonable for them to say, yes, in your vet school, we need graduates with all of these skills, please. So I think keep that in mind when we look at the results. And straight away, a bunch of skills were identified as clearly most important, and a couple of skills immediately identified as least important. So we're not saying that they're not skills that practitioners will do, but at graduation, they were not deemed as important skills to have. We gave the participants opportunities to add extra skills. At this point, they started giving us lots of professional skills and lots of knowledge, so I think we can come back to that at the end. But there are a couple of extra skills that we added. Then, as I said, with the consensus-based approach that the Delphi uses, we then took the remaining skills back to our practitioners. They voted again, and we started to come towards converge on agreement. You can see in round 2, not many more skills were reaching agreement as clearly, particularly or important or unimportant. So at that point, we felt we had our prioritized list. And then what we did in this Delphi, which is slightly unusual for a Delphi, was that we took our final list and we took it back to our participants for their comments. How do you feel about this list? Is there anything that surprises you? Ask them about their decision-making process, and you'll see we got a real wealth of data from that stage as well. So here are the results. It's a huge list, and it's quite difficult to present that on a screen for discussion. So you can link to the paper, and I'll put up a link again at the end to the paper if you want to have a look at the full list. But I'm just going to pick out some of our most interesting results. You'll see that it's kind of color-coded, so the top of the list, the things that were scoring 4 or 5 on our 1 to 5 scale are in green, and then those that were kind of clearly less important, scoring below a 3, were down in yellow. I've given you the mean score, so that's a nice way of kind of showing its rating of importance on that 1 to 5 scale. And the standard deviation is interesting because it's a kind of indicator of agreement of our group. So this is the top of the 3 lists. So we'd split them out because there were some skills that were unique to sheep, some that were unique to cattle, but some that were kind of common across cattle and sheep. So these are the top of those 3 lists. And hopefully you can see some really familiar skills up there. I'm sure they're the kind of bread and butter for all of our working lives, but we've got a lot of handling skills up there. Safe use of a cattle crush, getting the cow in and out of the crush, restraining her in the crush, or chute, perhaps, in non-UK terms. Applying a halter, tipping a sheep, and then giving some medicines or performing an examination. Now, a lot of these could be considered skills that farmers would have. And I think that was really clear that actually, as we all know, when you're working on farm, you're part of a team. You've got to be able to work together to handle the animals, restrain the animals, and so it's not surprising that these were at the top of the list. They're also going to be necessary to examine a sick patient, and maybe that represents the sort of work the new graduates are doing. And it's really important that you've got these skills to build credibility when you're trying to get started in farm animal practice and build that credibility with clients. Now moving just off the top of just down from the top of the list, some of the other skills that jumped out of it at us as kind of appearing near the top of the list were some of these emergency presentations. And again, as I'm sure you're all aware, being in ambulatory practice, you haven't just got someone you can immediately present your case to get a second opinion on. So there are some things that you're going to need to be able to do from the outset, at least until the backup support that might be arranged for you can arrive. So this might be things like dealing with acute trauma, hemostasis, or performing euthanasia, maybe assessing an obstetrical problem. And actually, we split the obstetrical problem out into stages, and it was only the assessment that featured high in the list. So interestingly, actually delivery of the calf or dealing with malpresentations in cattle actually fell quite a lot lower down the list. However, with sheep, you can see there that we have got correcting a malpresentation and delivering a lamb. Now jumping to the bottom of the list, it was interesting to see a few skills that I'm sure are all, again, the bread and butter of farm animal practitioners' work. So, for example, pregnancy diagnosis. If you think of a farm vet, particularly in the UK, the picture is of a person with their hand inside a cow. Isn't that the bread and butter of what we do? But it was really interesting to see that pregnancy diagnosis with an ultrasound scanner actually came out at the bottom of our list. So being able to do that wasn't deemed important as a skill for new graduates. And this has been a really important talking point when we go to students who, again, I don't know about your students, but ours are all really focused on being able to master that skill. And you can see there, even pregnancy diagnosis manually, so with that slightly later stage, actually that's still coming out quite low down the list. And similarly, performing a cesarean section, again, undeniably something that we're doing in practice, again, fell very low down the list as not a skill that was important at graduation. And again, when we started to look at some of the qualitative comments, that round 3, where they gave us some feedback on the list, practitioners talked about the fact that it was clear some skills need to be learned on the job, that you can't possibly prepare them within the veterinary curriculum for this. And it's acknowledged that they're going to pick these up by the repetitive practice and support they're going to get in the workplace. We also enjoyed looking at our list to see where the key differences were from the previously published lists. Again, we're not saying that these aren't skills that are important and are happening in practice, but perhaps they're not the priorities for what we should be teaching. So, for example, performing general anesthesia. It's necessary sometimes. It's there in the Royal College's Day 1 competencies, but actually that was one of the skills that straight away was identified as not important at graduation. And similarly there with post-mortem skills. Casting a cow, again, we were spending a lot of time with our first-year students, teaching them how to put a casting rope on, and actually it fell quite low down this list. And again, that was in contrast to the national practitioners list that was circulating at the time that had that as a key skill as well. So that was interesting to see. So looking at the qualitative analysis, this was the feedback that we got at the end from our practitioners. I think these bits are important to consider further because they add some context to the list as well. So the UK is not perhaps as diverse as other countries in terms of the types of practice that exist, but it is acknowledged that perhaps if you're in more beef and sheep practice, you might be seeing more broken legs that need casting and that sort of thing, whereas perhaps if you're in dairy practice, you will need some of those pregnancy diagnosis skills. But it was clear to see that there was this employer factor of a willingness to further train their graduates, which was great to see. As I've already mentioned, the client factors were hugely important. So actually having the skills that just allow you to be credible on farm, be confident in your approach, and allow the farmers, the clients to trust you was really important to get started in practice. And again, that was backed up by this statement here. You know, I consider the skills that farmers can perform themselves to be really important for new grads to be able to gain trust. And then finally, there was this element unique to ambulatory practice, where actually the new graduate needs to be able to cope until backup can arrive. So actually, there's going to be an element of needing to start the job or perform some emergency first aid until their backup can arrive. So it was good to see that kind of justified in this round 3 as well. So just to give some impact and reflections on the process, we've been able to use this list at Bristol in order to reevaluate our curriculum. So we didn't teach students how to use a cattle crush, how to use a chute. They were obviously doing it in their placements and maybe by final year, but we now bought a crush and spend some time with our first years getting them to move cattle through a crush. So that was an easy win. And then there are a few other skills such as stomach tubing of adult cattle that we realized we didn't really teach, and we were able to very quickly add those in. We've also had the opportunity to speak to some other vet schools in the UK and share this list with them and look at how they teach, and also the opportunity to see what methods they use to teach that. So does this need doing with live animals? Can we be using models? What models exist to allow students to learn these skills and practice these skills? I've also had the opportunity to speak to practitioners in the UK, because in the UK, I guess it's, well, probably the same elsewhere as well, but our practitioners play a really important role in how students will gain these skills, whether that's voluntary placements or a formal part of their teaching. Actually asking practitioners to focus again on the skills that came out the top of this list and not worry about sending them to that cesarean, but keeping them with them for that, you may be slightly boring seeming call where they're going to be handling the patients, administering medications, using their stethoscope, getting confident with their clinical exam. Those were the key skills that students needed to be practicing. This paper has now been published as well, so we do hope that it's out there and to give everybody a bit of food for thought to look at their own curricula perhaps and adjust it with this in mind, or perhaps to consider how this would apply and the differences in your own institutions and regions. So that is the link to the paper if anyone's interested. Again, like I say, the full list is in there for further consideration. Thanks very much. I hope there was some food for thought in that, and you can take that back to your respective institutions and practices and think about how you support our vets of the future.
Very nice. Okay, contrasting the needs of challenges of Sci University's real world is with academic training process is a need that we studied much more. Thank you, Dr. Sarah Wood. Any questions, please?
Yes, Peter Constable, University of Illinois. Thanks very much for your presentation. I've practiced both in England and the United States. I think practice is fairly similar between these two. There were two very large-scale surveys done in the United States 20 years ago that were interesting because they have different conclusions to yours. The first one is that there was a big difference between dairy practice expectations and beef cattle expectations. And the second one is in the top 10 expectations and frequency of done was castration and cesarean sections. And the castration was a real surprise to everyone, and that led to changes of a lot of curriculum. So I didn't see castration anywhere on yours, so could you comment on that and cesarean section?
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of those pieces of work, and they fed into the generation of our initial skills list. So yeah, it was great to have them. I think the thing that was interesting in those papers as well was looking at the frequency of what's being done in practice, and that was missing from this because we specifically wanted to know what that expectation at day 1 was, and we know that that's going to look different at year 1, at year 5, and year 10. So I think, yeah, really interesting work, and I'd encourage others to look. They're referenced in our paper as well. So in terms of castration, yeah, that did fall, I guess, again, if you look at the full paper link, and you can look at the full list, and it was a kind of a middling skill, so it's definitely something, castration is definitely something our students need some skills in. It didn't jump out at us as one of those ones that we weren't teaching, and it was sort of felt like it was being well covered between our curriculum and the experiences our students were getting. But yes, it was definitely in there. But cesarean, no, it was coming out low down the list as, again, no one's saying it's not happening in practice, but it just isn't a skill they need when they leave our doors and move out into practice. They're going to get support. Again, in the UK, it's well acknowledged that mentoring support is important as you start out in practice. And that mentoring will happen for those cesareans for an amount of time. So yeah, thank you for that question, and I think those are important to note. Just to pick up the difference in practice, I think we do know the practices that our Delphi participants came from. It wasn't an objective of this study to see if there were practice differences. It came out a little bit in the qualitative comments at the end, but I think we know with the UK it's rare to have. There are occasional beef-only practices, and we made sure we had representation of them in our demographics. Similarly with dairy practices, but most practices in the UK are doing a little bit of both. And I think as long as our students are aware that they could keep that in mind if they're planning to go into a particular area of work and to think about their skill set with that in mind, then that allows for adaptation of their experiences and skills, perhaps. Thank you for the question.
Hi, good morning. Just a point of reflection has to do with the hard skills. I understand it's so important for all the kids to have really strong hard skills, but let's just don't forget about the soft skills. Nothing is useless, and Dr. Dorstein, she made an amazing presentation. It's a breaking point for communication. Kids are normally very shy. They don't know how to make questions, so to include the soft skills, you know, it's useless many times for them to have the hard skill when they behave like social foreigners. So emotional intelligence, to bring down that soft skill in the kids is really important, just to make, probably to blend everything into the equation.
Yeah, thank you so much for making that point. So our practitioners completely reiterate that point in that every time I said to them what skills are missing, they just kept giving me soft skills. You've got to be a team player. You've got to be able to communicate. I said, that's not the point of this project, but it's clearly really important to them. That work is being done and has been done by others, but I actually have just applied for ethics to do this exact same project, but specifically looking at professional skills, because our practitioners are really engaged with us, but also clearly want to tell us more about what those soft skills are. So thank you for making that point, and totally agree, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, so as I understood, the rectal palpation and the ultrasound as well as C-sections were low. So I wonder if the practitioner's perception is that the students or the new graduate can acquire those skills in a reasonable time with proper mentoring and advice. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's great to be hearing about mentoring this morning, and I think actually, again, I don't want to make too many generalizations, but in the UK there are a lot more graduate schemes now that support students as they move out into practice. I think it is kind of hard to dig into that skill because, like I say, they could have just given it a 5. Nothing was stopping them giving a 5. They had unlimited 5s to use. So I can only think that they, I guess, can realize that just the logistics within the vet school perhaps don't allow that skill to be honed, or that they want to do the mentoring and support to gain that skill. I bet there's a whole other project in perhaps digging into that. But like I say, they could have said, yes, you need to come out with this skill. I think the only other thing to perhaps reflect upon is the work of a new graduate, and you're not going to send your new graduate to do the big fertility visits, certainly in the UK you're not. It wouldn't be good for clients, and it wouldn't be good for the student. And so even if they came out with those skills, that's probably not the work they're going to be doing, and maybe there would be this disillusion about the skills then that they were getting to use. So it must come from mentorship, and I think is, again, another lovely example of why that's so important for people to succeed in practice. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Sarawood. Okay. Thank you for all for attending this room on education in ruminant veterinary medicine. 2 facts communication. The first, outside we have for all a little wine and food. It's great news. And second, remember the closing the event in 30 minutes, okay? Thank you for all. Wish bad day.
We were good, we were gold, kind of dream that can't be a home and watched it burn. I didn't want to leave you, I didn't want to lie. Started to cry, then remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name on the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. Can love me better. I can love me better, baby. Can love me better. I can love me better. Paint my nails cherry red, match the roses that you left. No remorse, no regret. I forgive every word you said. Oh, I didn't want to leave you. I didn't want to fight. Started to cry, then remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. I can love me better, baby. 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 I didn't want to leave you, I didn't want to fight. Started to cry, but then remembered I can buy myself flowers by myself, write my name in the sand all by myself, talk to myself for hours by myself, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own hand. Yeah, I can love me better than. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. I can love me better than you can. I can love me better than you can. I can love me better, baby. I can love me better, baby. I can love me better, baby. I can love me better.
Tell me something, girl. Are you happy in this modern world? Or do you need more? Is there something else you're searching for? I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times I fear myself.
Tell me something, boy. Are you tired of trying to feel that void? Or do you need more? Ain't it hard keeping it so hardcore? I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times I fear myself. I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground, crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now. In the shallow